Hello everyone and welcome to Music Theory with GUIM. In this installment we're going to discuss the augmented sixth interval in terms of both construction and resolution. This is a very simple concept, but it's paramount in understanding the theory of the augmented sixth chords for both traditional and experimental uses. Let's begin with the interval's construction. This is again a simple task, and this is especially so if you know your major sixth intervals really well. If you do not, however, well, you probably shouldn't be looking at advanced chromatic techniques anyways. So, if you know your major sixth intervals, then simply follow the instructions of the augmented sixth interval's name. By this I mean augment or raise your major sixth by a semitone. That's all it is. For instance, if we have the note C, the major sixth above C is A. And if we raise A by a semitone, we have the note A sharp. As a result, we can state that the augmented sixth of C is A sharp. This is just like the perfect fourth that has raised a semitone to become an augmented fourth. It is worth noting that many notes will produce potentially awkward spellings, such as mixed intervals or double sharps. That said, you should not arbitrarily select any spelling of the note a semitone above the major sixth. You must raise the major sixth itself. Changing the letter changes the implied relation. For instance, the major sixth above A is F sharp. You might be tempted to raise F sharp by a semitone to G, but that spells a minor seventh, not an augmented sixth. In order to write an augmented sixth, you must augment the sixth itself by raising F sharp to F double sharp. This might be tricky for some and potentially even seem pointless, but if you intend to study scores of other serious composers, I certainly recommend you train yourself to write and read proper spellings of augmented sixth intervals. And if you study the interval diligently, it will not be too long before you're simply thinking of the augmented sixth interval rather than going through the process of building a major sixth and then raising it. Also, as shown earlier, the augmented sixth is enharmonically equivalent to the minor seventh. That said, I strongly recommend you study the augmented sixth from the perspective of a raised major sixth rather than an enharmonic seventh. This will make sense in the future when we discuss the traditional implementations and how the augmented sixth operates and potentially where it comes from. Now that we have the basics of construction, let's discuss the resolution of the augmented sixth. The augmented sixth interval resolves by moving both notes of the interval in contrary motion to form an octave. This is achieved by the bass tone resolving downward by a semitone and the augmented sixth resolving upward by a semitone. For instance, the augmented sixth interval built from B flat would resolve the bass tone B flat downward by a semitone to A. And the augmented sixth G sharp would resolve upward by semitone also to A, thus creating an octave of A. This outward resolution to an octave is what defines the sound of the augmented sixth. It's such a bold statement and really highlights the note resolved to. This is why it is important to indicate the augmented sixth rather than the minor seventh. The minor seventh has a tendency to lower the minor seventh itself by either a semitone or a whole tone. For instance, the minor seventh above C is B flat, and it would typically resolve itself by lowering B flat to A or A flat and letting the note C remain in place or leap elsewhere. And now that we have covered both the construction and resolution of the augmented sixth interval, we're ready to wrap up. So let's review. In terms of construction, the augmented sixth interval is a major sixth interval that has been extended or augmented by a single semitone. If the major sixth of D flat is B flat, then the augmented sixth will raise B flat to B natural. In terms of resolution, the augmented sixth resolves both tones to an octave by lowering the bass tone and raising the augmented sixth. In the case of this augmented sixth, D flat would be lowered to C and B would be raised to C, thus forming an octave of C. But before I let you go, there are a couple of points I want to cover real quickly. Firstly, notice that I use the term bass note rather than root when referring to the augmented sixth. This term will be used even when constructing augmented sixth chords, and this is due to many theorists believing that the augmented sixth has no root, or at least has a root that cannot be determined. That said, you're free to think of the bass tone as the root in most situations. However, this channel will use the term bass note most of the time. Another point I'd like to make is that when inverted, the augmented sixth will become a diminished third. This is less common to see in earlier periods of music, but it does occur. In terms of resolution, the two tones would still resolve in contrary motion, only now it will form a unison. That said, if you raise the diminished third by an octave to form a diminished 10th, you will still form an octave when resolving. So study this interval and try to build it from any note you can. I would not worry about studying augmented 6th intervals that utilize triple accidentals, such as the augmented 6th of E sharp being C triple sharp, but do not shy away from bass tones with double flats, they'll certainly occur, and also do not shy away from tones that create double sharps for their augmented 6ths. Those are also very common. And should you happen to have any questions regarding what the augmented 6th of a given note would be, feel free to leave a comment below asking for advice. In the next episode, we're going to determine where the augmented 6th is typically found in a tonality, and then we can start constructing chords. Until then, however, study diligently, and thank you for watching this episode of Music Theory with GUIM.